Think about how your brand looks, how your culture looks, how your job ad looks, what are your benefits, before you start kind of demanding literally just your recruiters to just bring you people who are just not welcome in your workplace. And I think this kind of discussion around kind of just basically filling the seats with the people that look the way you want them to versus actually transforming your culture is actually one of the things that I see most. And I think it's a dangerous trend, because it just, at this point, is just tokenistic, which means you're inviting people over just to be a statistic that you can then put on your tender and nothing more. And this is a very dangerous avenue to go to. And that's something I'm seeing.
Hello, welcome back to Wotter Future. Last time out, we were joined by Paul Devoy of Investors in People. What a great conversation that was. But this week, we're moving on to a conversation with Dr. Olga Franczak. Olga is an equality, diversity and inclusion expert who's worked both internationally and in the UK. Currently, she's working at the REC, and prior to that, she was working and researching for the Council of Europe. Olga, I am so grateful to have you with us today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very excited to be here.
My pleasure, my pleasure. Let's jump straight into the first question. Everyone knows it by now. What is the biggest issue affecting the world of work right now?
I'm really glad we're starting with the small and easy questions. But to me, what it is that the labor market has changed dramatically just in the last few years to kind of like unprecedented extent, with Brexit, with the pandemic, with the huge impact of technology and AI, Gen Z entering the labor market at full force, but also on the other side, older workers and the kind of aging working population as well. And to me, the expectations of candidates and clients have changed dramatically in the last 3 years. But what I find is that workplaces, employers have troubles adapting to that. And that is, to me, the biggest challenge here, because we see time and time again that work becomes less transactional. It becomes more about building relationships. It becomes about building careers. Same with clients' relationships. Clients are asking, what more can you do for me? How can you support me on my development and on my journey? And what I find is that a lot of companies are struggling to adapt to that. And obviously, me being equality, diversity, and inclusion expert, to me, this is a very big part of that as well, because we see time and time again that more and more candidates are asking, what does your culture look like? What do you do around equality, diversity, and inclusion? And how do you try to make your community a better place? What is your social impact? And for so many companies, that still remains this kind of fluffy stuff that they don't really need to consider. But what we see now is that they miss out on talent, because we are in the UK experiencing unprecedented labor shortages at the moment. And we've seen it at the Recruitment and Employment Confederation in our report, that we have examples of candidates refusing work when the potential employer fails to provide some equality and diversity and inclusion credentials. But that also goes into kind of tender process and winning new business. This is also a question that clients are asking. Can you tell me what are you doing? And so many companies are missing out on that. I'm missing out on this talent. Are missing out on the business, because they do not yet see the value. And I can definitely empathize with that, because obviously there's so much pressures right now on on employees, on employers. How do I win that talent? How do I retain it? But I think it's time that the labor market understands that there is no really going back to how it was 5-10 years ago, and those who refuse to adapt are going to miss out. And I think it is a systemic is a systemic issue. It's not up to one company, one person, one department. But I think there is this great quote that says that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So if you fail to adapt your culture, the greatest strategies are not going to be meaningful. So I would see this lack of adaptability and understanding that the world of work has changed and the expectations have changed of both clients and candidates and your employees. So that's something I would pinpoint as a kind of meta problem that our labor market is facing right now.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I was picturing as you were talking there about this kind of, you're right. If we take this sort of culture and ED&I thing to one side a sec, like businesses are struggling with inflation, with changing pressures with regards to technology, with macroeconomic issues, with potential downturns in economy, asset price changes with regards to things like office space not being as valuable as it used to be because of changing working practices with regards to working, like all of these things have sort of been thrown at business leaders, and they're sat there going like, oh, how do I like fix this? I think I can just about sort of put a strategy in, and then like what's kind of missing, you sort of add that ED&I and change it, the Gen Z, everything you mentioned there, like this is like a wave coming in from the side that's just going to threaten to derail everything we're doing. And I think it's right that we are in this kind of difficult period where it's who knows what to do, and I think we can be very quick to point fingers, and as you said, I recently filled in a load of stuff about, or my team did, about what social good Wotter is doing with regards to a tender that we moved for, and so I've seen that ourselves. Thankfully, we do quite a lot for the local communities. It wasn't too difficult to fill in, but I think this is. You're right that this is becoming an acute problem where before it's sort of been a problem that's over there that some people can deal with and other people don't, and the guys who are trendy and on trend, whereas it's going to hit all companies at some point in the near future. Is that fair to say?
No, absolutely. And I think the earlier companies realize that, the better. And I would actually argue that you really cannot take issues of equality, diversity, and inclusion out of the equation when you're talking about your profits, when you're talking about talent attraction, when you're talking about your office space, when you talk about your work policies. That actually, what I like to say to everyone who listens, that actually equality, diversity, and inclusion is just another avenues that modern businesses are taking to alleviate some of those pressures. And I think if there's one thing I could argue here is to see your work towards equality, diversity, and inclusion as a kind of solution to all of your other problems. Because what is it? It's about people, and you have people everywhere. Your clients are people, your candidates are people, your supply chain, those are all people. And like understanding that this is actually a way for you to support some of those challenges and actually alleviate some of those pressures. But I would definitely agree that it's something that is coming, and there are some companies that are realizing it, and I'm very glad to hear about the good work you're doing at Wotter. But I have talked to companies that then reached out to me saying, we've lost business, we've lost tender. There's this client that we've worked with before. Now they have this equality, diversity, and inclusion question, or now they have this social responsibility question. How do I even address that? Can you give me like a tick box that I can just put there and everyone is going to be happy? And this is a part of that kind of I want to say outdated thinking, but again, I'm saying that with the biggest possible compassion that I can see, because this is the messaging we're kind of getting. You know, oh, do I have to? The ED&I people are coming in and unconscious bias, and like I don't have enough problems. So I understand where this kind of, there is even a term called ED&I fatigue, where people are just really not responding to that. And that's why I'm trying to argue that it is about helping solve your problems. It's about winning new business. It's about attracting and winning best talent and retaining that talent, because your employees are going to feel, you know, safe and empowered. They're going to be feeling safer to also bring up innovative ideas, etc., etc. So I like to position this as a solution to problems. And it's also not something that kind of exists somewhere over there. It's sometimes seen as, you know, HR people are going to deal with that, or, you know, maybe we have our own equality, diversity, and inclusion person, they're going to deal with that. But I fundamentally believe that this is something that has to be mainstreamed within everything that you do. So if you want to have a successful, you know, business strategy, it has to address the fact that you have a diverse workforce, that you have a diverse society right now, that your clients have, you know, different needs, that you have different groups that are becoming more vocal about what they need. And this is something that, if you don't take a look at it now, you are going to miss out. And I think there is a lot of, you know, organizations that are happy to support. There is a lot of, you know, great networks on LinkedIn that can help you with some of those challenges that you have. And yeah, once again, I absolutely understand the frustrations, especially talking about LinkedIn, that sometimes if you go over there, it seems that everyone has it already figured out and everyone is an expert and everyone is already so great at it. Then kind of starting it can be a bit difficult. But I just want to say that it's, if you're an employer who is struggling with understanding how to innovate within ED&I space and how to use it to better your business, you're not alone in it. And please do not feel that this is something you should automatically, in quotation mark, get. It's a skill, it's a knowledge, it's just another avenue to explore as a modern business.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, you know, talking of that and what it's sort of doing and of how it's affecting people, can you sort of give examples perhaps of how, like, what are the sort of like most common things that people see that is happening kind of in a lot of places? Obviously not to sort of tar everyone with the same brush, but like what are the kind of ways that this manifests itself in companies that people might be able to recognize in their own?
The question I've seen a lot, and just within the ED&I space, if you're an ED&I expert, and it's company, because this kind of ED&I literacy is kind of growing in a lot of companies. A lot of companies are focusing on the diversity kind of things. And I have genuinely once been asked by a company when they were talking, we need 30% women in our workplace. That's our goal. And we see it time and time again when companies are setting these diversity targets, want to have this percentage of representation of let's say Black people on our board, etc., etc. And I find it a bit difficult way of thinking, because I remember I kind of provocatively said, oh, you want 30% women in your company, why don't you just fire like 50% of men and just put women in there, problem solved, you know, everyone gets home early. So I think because of these pressures, companies focus on kind of diversity issues. So can we get more women? Can we get more people with disabilities into our company, without really recognizing whether or not this is a safe space for these people to stay there, if it is a place for these people to actually, for sorry if we use the these people, but if it is a safe space for candidates to actually come in and work, because it's we live in a such a market where we are about quick wins, and we sometimes have recruiters being asked, "Can you get me a woman, literally, to go and work in this company?" And I think that's one of the biggest challenges, is to try to explain to companies that unfortunately you need to slow down and actually ensure that you have a equitable feminist workplace before you think of like, oh, we need to have 30% women in our workplace. And again, it is good to set targets, and it is very good to measure progress, but don't see filling in this target as the main goal, because you're missing the trick here, which is, are women going to be safe and want to stay in this company? And I think that's one of the challenges I see a lot of, because companies are under pressure. They're like, okay, I need to fill this target, get me those people in here. And this is not the way to approach things. And inclusive recruitment starts much earlier than you think. Think about how your brand looks, how your culture looks, how your job ad looks, what are your benefits, before you start kind of demanding literally just your recruiters to just bring you people who are just not welcome in your workplace. And I think this kind of discussion around kind of just basically filling the seats with the people that look the way you want them to, versus actually transforming your culture, is actually one of the things that I see most. And I think it's a dangerous trend, because it just, at this point, is just tokenistic, which means you're inviting people over just to be a statistic that you can then put on your tender, and nothing more. And this is a very dangerous avenue to go to. And that's something I'm seeing due to these pressures.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I mean, often, when you look at problems, people focus on sort of like fixing the symptom rather than fixing the cause. It's for like when you have a cough and you take a cough sweet to stop yourself coughing, like you're fixing the symptom. Now that's because the body will fix itself and your cold will disappear. But in this instance, you don't have that kind of healing thing with your culture going on. I suppose, is it fair to say that this can almost have the opposite sort of negative effect, where if you try and sort of shoehorn diversity quotas into a culture that isn't kind of set up already for that, or for looking at it, then this can actually have a negative effect on everyone that's there already as well. And so you have a kind of like a double whammy, don't you? You've got people coming in that are then leaving because of your culture, but also actually you've got people within your team already that are frustrated that this thing's happening without sort of proper due diligence.
Absolutely. And this is a topic that I am incredibly passionate about. And this is literally the kind of connections between something so kind of, the connection between symptoms and the actual disease. So, how little things then build up into bigger things. That genuinely is the topic of my PhD. So thank you very much. And I didn't even tell you that. So that's fantastic. But genuinely, that is a big kind of modern workplace issue as well, when you're just trying to basically address the symptoms. So something has happened. We've had a case of discrimination. Let's send that manager to anti-discrimination training, problem solved. We've had a case of I don't know, pay gap or something, and we're gonna pay them more, done deal. But what this does not, those are all kind of individual level interventions for systemic problems. And it is much more comfortable to be able to say, oh, we've had, this situation with, let's say, sexual harassment. We're going to organize now sexual harassment training. And I'm not saying it doesn't have a place. It definitely, absolutely does. but it doesn't address questions of how does your leadership look like? How do you make decision? How is your management style? What is the process for addressing grievances? What are the different avenues if you don't feel comfortable talking to your manager and even, higher manager, who do you get to speak to? Who are some of the people that have been properly trained and also have a proper authority to actually deal with these issues and not just be a friendly ear? Do you address that? And to your kind of second point around that, this can actually reproduce the same kind of structures that you're trying to dismantle. And it is very, very true. And actually, one of the terms that I find really problematic, even though I'm 100% sure that in most of the cases, it's not meant as a bad thing. But when I hear about helping people from disadvantaged background, helping women, helping people with disabilities, because in many people's heads, this reinforces the idea that these are the groups that need special help. These are the groups that need the special support, and we graciously are granting it. I am blessed with the fact that someone wants to help me. It's not about that. We need a system that realizes these people's rights, that this system that realizes my rights. I want, equal access, equal opportunities, and I want this, not special support, not special, all of that, because again, that reinforces the idea that, let's say, in a gender equality kind of sphere, that it is women that need special help. Because those interventions also very often target women. Mm-hmm. So basically, let us, in quotation mark, help you embody more men's characteristic so you can be successful. It does nothing to change the way we perceive women in a workplace or how we see, people with disabilities in a workplace. And I think that is very, very true. Because it needs to, if you're talking about gender is not just women. The same way when you're talking about race and ethnicity, that also includes white people. How come, we don't address that, there are people who are privileged. It's not to kind of blame and shame, but, let's work together and how we can see both kind of, all sides of this conversation. And I think that is also a problem. So kind of missing the underlying challenges. And in the any kind of Western workplace, things like banter are just such seen as like, oh, you cannot say anymore, you cannot say anything anymore, etc., etc. And because we lack this understanding and sensitivity of it stems from something, this joke, and leads to something as well. And that's something that I think more and more companies should realize, and not just in terms of it's a right thing to do, but it is about your employee safety, about your employee well-being, about you protecting yourself from lawsuit. It's about you making sure that your staff are safe and empowered to raise questions, raise ideas, innovate, and bring in some new systems into your workplace. So it's something that for many years hasn't been talked about, and that's why people find it so strange to talk about it now. Oh, it's a workplace. Why should I be concerned about what people joke about? But this is the reality now, and you cannot escape it.
Yeah, I think there's just before we sort of dig into the second sort of question, there's one more thought I just had. You're right. We built traditionally in the UK and in the West in general, and I'm talking to 50 years ago, men were the primary breadwinners, and women largely, workforce participation from women was much lower. It therefore goes to figure that working practices have been built around men in the workforce. That seems like a sort of logical conclusion. It's a bad thing, but it's a logical conclusion. And one example I can think of, for example, here is that for the most part in the UK, schools finish at about 3 o'clock, and yet work finishes at about 5 o'clock. And so you need someone who isn't doing a 9 to 5, or you have to pay for childcare in order to go and pick that child up. And generally that responsibility falls on women, and the work day set up like that reinforces that issue. And so it brings me to an idea that I heard a little while ago, which is that to the privileged, equality feels like oppression, because you're having you're not trying to say, hey, you're a bad person, you look at you're privileged, and oh, how dare you. What you're saying is, I want to take that privilege and I want to share it around with everyone, and I want to feed into that more, far more equal society. And I think, back to the idea of culture being sort of like reinforced. If, let's say you've taken a drive, you're to hire more women, as we said earlier. Women come into the team and then they don't stay in the team. They do this because it's a male-centric environment and it's not, good for equality. That's causing a problem. And all of a sudden, the men can come to an idea that, oh well, women just won't make it here. But that's the wrong conclusion. It's the opposite conclusion to what they need to be doing. But we're not quick to turn around and say, oh gosh, maybe I'm the privileged one here. Maybe I'm the one that's reinforcing this issue that shouldn't be happening. And so I think it's easy to see how people kind of fall into these psychological traps when it comes to these areas, but that are ultimately sort of gently and well, not even gently, sometimes quite violently, sort of tipping the scales against what we're trying to achieve here. I don't know whether any of that rings true.
No, absolutely. I mean, the quote that to a privileged group, equality seems like oppression is so true. It's absolutely so true. And I think in terms of, again, trying not to be so I think it's important to understand that you having privilege, it doesn't mean that you're guilty of something, or that anyone is accusing you or anyone else or myself of something. But I think it is to understand how it affects how we perceive world and how the world perceives us. And I think it comes down to the kind of thought that I've mentioned before, to address issues on a systemic level and not on an individual level. Because let's say, yes, we have a team with a sexist culture and women just exit that team. There is the reason why this team has functioned this way for such a long time. And it's not to say that it's not the fault or it's up to the individuals to take ownership of their own actions, but where was the company when this was happening? Where was the leadership? Where was HR? Where was finance when it came to giving bonuses, and those teams were still praised for their great work? Where was all of that? As humans, we're lazy. We're not going to be changing our behavior until we see why. And I think once again, it's about inviting people in, calling people into the conversation. And I'm not saying that if someone's doing something wrong, there shouldn't be consequences. But again, it's easy for companies to point at a team and be like, we're gonna get rid of that team and issue solved. No, because that issue is gonna appear in a different team, and definitely this is about kind of how do we approach these issues on a systemic level without pointing fingers. As I always say, don't blame the people, blame the system. because the organizational culture and structure allowed for this to happen. And these people were also hired. They went through probation and everyone was like, yes, great, peachy. Go on, work. And no one said anything and no one noticed anything because that wasn't seen as an issue. And that can be a bit of a challenge when then someone's like, let's say in this example, a woman comes up and says, there is an issue. If it's very easy to then position that woman as a problem, because
Yes.
there wasn't an issue before she arrived.
Yeah.
So once again, it's not about the individuals, it's about the systems, and then individuals are kind of, in a way, again, not to deny people free will, absolutely not, but we exist within the system, and we're kind of products of our own kind of systems of discrimination and of oppression.
Absolutely. Well, let's jump forward into a more sort of hopefully upbeat and powerful one. I think it's important for people to understand. Okay, if I do this, if I listen to this, if I take this on board, like what's the difference? Do I just get a warm fuzzy feeling that I'm a good person, or like what actually? What happens, what affects our business. So the second question here is if we can fix this, let's just say we've waved a magic wand and all of a sudden we fixed ED&I. I mean, if only, right? But let's say we've done that. What does the world look like? Where do we move to? What does the world look like in 5 years' time if we tackle this and make meaningful strides?
No, absolutely. So there've been countless studies to show that more inclusive and diverse companies have much better profit. And that just comes from the fact that you get innovation and creative ideas and ways of thinking that you wouldn't have had otherwise. I think it was Apple or Google, like one of those big giant, like 10 years ago, they've realized that how come, we're like, there are some ways we just cannot innovate, and they realized they were always recruiting from the same course from the same university.
Right.
Where are you going to get those ideas if you're not looking at people with different experiences, with different points of view? So definitely there is a kind of bottom line argument to it, the famous business case for equality, diversity, and inclusion. So it is about innovation, it is about creation, it is about winning new businesses, reaching markets that you wouldn't have reached otherwise, building a brand that stands out, you being able to kind of grow within the community and taking your community on a journey. And learning from your clients and from your suppliers and from your employees, and constantly grow. So you're not going to have to bring in always external consultants, help us innovate, because that is going to be happening naturally. So it not only kind of increases your profit, but kind of also decreases your spending, because people are going to want to stay to work with you. You're not going to have to constantly recruit. You're going to have more kind of faithful clients, and winning new ones is going to be easier. But also within your company, your employees are going to feel safer and healthier. So, less sick days, better well-being, less costs around that. Also, better employee relationships. In the most dramatic kind of cases, you're protected from, potential lawsuits, etc., etc. So let's not forget that it's also a legal issue that then kind of becomes no longer becomes a pressure for you. Your team becomes more effective. Your teams becomes more productive in the ways that it's useful. So, it's not just about looking busy, but actually, being effective in how they can take their time. And yeah, you just have healthier and safer, both professionally and personally, employees. And I think, the driving factor to me is the innovation and the exchange. And that's something that is massively impactful. And in the world where it's so easy to set up your own company, getting a website up is, so easy. You need to think about those things as soon as possible, because the labor market, the new generations are not going to be waiting for you. But that's a good thing, because you have so many resources to learn from, and your employees are your biggest asset. So kind of employ them on that journey and draw from this richness of experience that you have to better your company, to be more competitive, to be more innovative. So long story short, we should do it.
We should do it. I'm convinced, certainly. I think one of the sort of interesting ideas that I've been thinking about that I think ties in quite nicely here is that we're going to face unprecedented levels of change over the next 5 years with massive socioeconomic things going on, macroeconomic issues, including war in Europe, but also technological advancements. And I think really we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg with what generative AI can achieve. And I think we should be prepared that old dynasties of this is how we've always done it are probably not going to find themselves so competitive in the modern world, because as you say, it's very easy to set up a business. It costs £15 in the UK to register a company at Companies House, and then you've got a company, and then you make a website which you can do through generative AI on Wix or whatever it is you like, and all of a sudden, bang, I exist. And then in the next few years, it's going to be the point where anyone who has an idea that fixes a problem that people are seeing, they'll be able to get the code written by an AI, and they'll be able to get all their marketing stuff written by an AI, and so there may well be a case to say that humans will do it better. But if the ideas and the problems that we're facing, if we're not providing solutions to them on a sort of innovative level, then we're just going to find ourselves falling backwards. And so not only is the old saying, culture's the biggest thing you've got. Absolutely, I believe that to be true. But I also believe that that's going to become even more acutely true in the next 5 years. I would almost go, in fact, no, I will go as far as to say it's all you've got. Everything else that you know about your business could be ripped up in the next 5 years. All your processes, all the assets that you've got could become defunct and technologically superseded. All your processes are going to be refined and changed by AI by necessity because all of your competitors are doing. So all you've got is your culture and the innovation within that culture to address these problems and fix these problems. And if you don't have that space,
and I think it's something to also remember that within the technology side of things, people are going to have access to more and more technology and AI, like you've mentioned. So then it's actually the people that can give you this competitive advantage. Because I'm not saying all companies have access to the same technology, absolutely not. But again, let's say you're starting, you're not going to have all this massive capital to invest in, particular piece of technology, but you will be hiring someone to help you. And who that person is and what they can bring into your company and development of it can make you stand apart. And obviously, I wouldn't be an equality, diversity, and inclusion expert if I didn't say that we need to remember that AI also exists within a certain system, and there have been examples of AI reproducing bias. So which I'm not saying, once again, that it cannot be an incredibly useful tool, and technology can be so massively helpful within equality, diversity, and inclusion, even collecting data and understanding where should we be going. Technology can be such an amazing tool for that. I would just warn that if you're a company that thinks AI is going to solve everything and reduce all the bias within my recruitment process, we're not there. We're not there at the moment. I cannot tell you if we're ever going to be there, but the fact that not only does AI sometimes reproduce certain biases, but actually reinforces them. That's something to remember. But once again, it's, to me, looking into the future. It's like I'm, apart from everything that is going on, I'm trying to be hopeful, and actually part of that kind of optimism stems from the fact that I'm really trying to help our members, recruiters at the Recruitment and Employment Confederation, but also any other companies that this is a solution to your problems. This is a way to innovate. Equality, diversity, and inclusion is your way into making your business more sustainable, better, more creative, more profitable. It's not, don't see it as this kind of added on pressure within this very difficult difficult market. So yeah, I think it's also from kind of talking about that, I feel like in the next 5 years, ED&I is going to be becoming more and more kind of embedded within the labor market, which hopefully then actually encourages more and more companies to take that on board and reap the benefits of it.
I suppose that's the case. There's also a competitive case, isn't there? That if you're slow to the trend, then your competitors have got the one up on you. So while the classic sort of adoption curve, there will be the sort of laggards who come to it late. Who hopefully the fact that they're still going to move forward with it is good. Fundamentally we need people, we need everyone to do it, even if to some degree it's in their own time. But I think there's an awful lot of advantage, as you say, to moving now. Look, we're getting we're sort of running out of time a little bit. It's been an absolutely fascinating conversation. I think, to be honest, we could go and do the whole thing again tomorrow and still come up with a load more. But look, if people want to find out more from you and more of your thinking, where's best for people to find you?
Yeah, I think Olga Franczak on LinkedIn. You can find me there. That's the best way to find me.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Olga. It's been really fascinating, and I think a really strong case for why, as you say, ED&I is not just a sort of bolt-on that is a nice to have. Actually, it is the solution, the fundamental solution to an awful lot of problems that businesses face. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us.
No, thank you so much for having me.
Hello, thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed today's episode, then please do like and subscribe. If you want to hear more from me, then you can find me on LinkedIn. Or if you want to hear more about what Wotter's trying to achieve, then do take a look at our website and get in touch. Links to both of those are below. Thanks again for joining us. I look forward to seeing you next time.